The secret of Elijah. That every Christian should know. Welcome to Science for Real, where we explore the deepest mysteries and the powerful truths from both science and faith. In today's video, we embark on a wonderful journey to uncover the secret of Elijah that every Christian should know. Elijah, one of the most powerful prophets in the Bible. What made him so unique? What secret gave him unshakable faith and extraordinary power in a chaotic world? Get ready, because this is not just a historical story, but a key that can transform your spiritual life. 1. Introduction to the extraordinary life of Elijah. Elijah is one of the greatest prophets in biblical history, known for his life full of faith and supernatural power. He appeared during a time of spiritual and political turmoil, when the nation of Israel was divided and had fallen into moral decay. With extraordinary courage, Elijah stood up against false gods and corrupt rulers, especially King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, who led Israel in the worship of Baal. Elijah's life is remembered not only for the miraculous deeds he performed, but also for his bravery in challenging an entire idolatrous society, standing alone to testify to the existence and power of God. One of the most memorable moments in Elijah's life was the confrontation on Mount Carmel, where he faced off against 450 prophets of Baal. During a 3-year drought, Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal to prove their God's power by calling down fire from heaven. When they failed, Elijah, with unshakable faith in God, called upon the Lord, and fire immediately fell from heaven, consuming the sacrifice, proving the absolute power of God. This was a powerful demonstration of Elijah's unwavering faith and his ability to carry out God's will. Not only was Elijah known for public miracles, but he also performed deeply personal ones, such as raising a widow's son from the dead. This highlights the profound relationship Elijah had with God, a relationship built on continuous prayer and absolute loyalty. Elijah trusted God not only in grand moments, but also in the small, everyday details of life. Elijah's life also exemplifies steadfast faith, even when faced with challenging times and trials. After his victory on Mount Carmel, Elijah had to flee from Queen Jezebel's threats and went through moments of weakness and fear. However, even in those moments, God did not abandon him. Instead, God appeared to Elijah, comforting him with a gentle whisper, reminding him of his presence and encouraging him to continue his prophetic mission. What is particularly remarkable about Elijah's life is that, though his story took place thousands of years ago, the lessons of faith and his relationship with God remain just as relevant for Christians today. Elijah is not just a historical prophet, but a symbol of courage, unshakable faith, and persistent prayer, qualities that can transform the life of anyone willing to pursue a close relationship with God. Elijah's extraordinary strength did not come from his natural abilities, but from his unwavering loyalty and absolute faith in God's power and will. This is the secret that every Christian can access and apply in their own life. 2. The social and spiritual context during Elijah's time. During the time of the prophet Elijah, the social and spiritual state of Israel was undergoing a dark and chaotic period marked by religious, political, and moral turmoil. This period, around the 9th century BC, followed the division of the Kingdom of Israel into two: the Northern Kingdom, Israel, and the Southern Kingdom, Judah. The Northern Kingdom, where Elijah carried out his ministry, fell into severe moral and spiritual decay under the reign of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. One of the primary causes of Israel's spiritual downfall at that time was the widespread worship of Baal, a pagan god popular among the Canaanite civilizations. King Ahab, under the influence of Queen Jezebel, who came from Phoenicia and was a devout follower of Baal, built temples to Baal and actively promoted the worship of this false god throughout the kingdom. Ahab not only erected altars to Baal, but also established a prophetic system that served Baal, making the worship of this deity commonplace across Israel. This violated God's commandments and led to a deep spiritual crisis among the Israelites. Under Ahab and Jezebel's rule, the people of Israel were torn between two options: worshiping the true God of their ancestors or following the pagan practices endorsed by their king and queen. Baal worship was not only a religious issue, but also deeply affected the culture and morality of the society. The people drifted away from their faith in God and began to indulge in a corrupt lifestyle, abandoning the values passed down by their forefathers. Ahab, described in the Bible as one of the most wicked kings in Israel's history, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. 1 Kings 16:30. His wickedness and moral decline were not only rooted in encouraging Baal worship, but also in his blatant disregard for God's laws and values. Queen Jezebel, a powerful and ruthless figure, not only led her husband into Baal worship, but also actively pursued and killed the prophets of God. She ordered the massacre of those who opposed Baal worship, including God's prophets, spreading fear among the faithful. It was in this bleak social and spiritual landscape that God called the prophet Elijah to rise as a voice of truth amid the sea of deception. Elijah stood as the only man with enough courage and faith to confront the corrupt and idolatrous system established by Ahab and Jezebel. His appearance was not only meant to save the souls of the Israelites, but also to restore their loyalty to the one true God. Elijah confronted the prophets of Baal head-on, challenging the nation's idolatry and demonstrating unshakable faith in the power of God. The spiritual decay that Elijah faced shares many similarities with the challenges of the modern world. Just as in Elijah's time, we live in a world where moral values have diminished. Truth is often seen as relative, and faith in God is mocked or forgotten. Today's society, much like Elijah's, struggles with the temptations of materialism, power, and the worship of things that replace true faith in God. This makes Elijah's story highly relevant and meaningful for modern-day Christians, who must also stand firm in the face of worldly temptations and attacks on their faith. In conclusion, Elijah's time was a period of immense spiritual and moral decay. It was in this context that God called Elijah to be a beacon of faith, leading the Israelites back to God and away from false idols. His mission was not only to oppose Baal worship, but also to restore faith and reverence for God in a time of spiritual chaos and loss. 3. The Challenge on Mount Carmel. The Challenge on Mount Carmel is one of the most significant events in the life of the prophet Elijah, and a pinnacle of his mission to confront Baal worship in Israel. This event was not merely a religious confrontation between Elijah and the prophets of Baal, but a powerful demonstration of God's authority and a restoration of Israel's faith. For 3 years, Israel had suffered from drought and famine, which Elijah had prayed for as divine punishment for the nation's spiritual decline. The people were desperate and torn between worshiping the God of their ancestors or turning to foreign gods like Baal, who was believed to be the god of rain and fertility. Yet Baal could not bring rain, casting doubt on the reality and power of these pagan deities. God commanded Elijah to put an end to this false worship and lead the people of Israel back to him. Elijah issued a bold challenge, publicly facing off against 450 prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel to prove who the true God was. Elijah proposed a simple yet decisive contest. He invited the prophets of Baal to prepare an altar with a bull as an offering, and he would do the same for the Lord. However, no one was allowed to set fire to the altars. Instead, they would pray to their gods to send fire from heaven to consume the offering. The God who responded with fire would be recognized as the one true God. This challenge was clear and fair, with all of Israel witnessing and judging for themselves. The 450 prophets of Baal began their prayers early in the morning and continued until noon, calling upon Baal to answer with fire. They danced, shouted, and even cut themselves as a sign of devotion, hoping to attract Baal's attention. However, all their efforts were in vain. The Bible records, there was no response, no one answered. This not only exposed the impotence of the prophets of Baal, but also highlighted the falsehood and futility of pagan worship. After the prophets of Baal failed, it was Elijah's turn. With confidence and unwavering faith, Elijah invited the people to come closer as he prepared the altar. He repaired the altar of the Lord using 12 stones to represent the 12 tribes of Israel and dug a trench around it. To further emphasize the power of God, Elijah instructed that water be poured over the offering and the wood 3 times, filling the trench with water. This made the possibility of lighting a fire nearly impossible, further showcasing the miraculous nature of what was about to happen if God answered. Elijah then prayed a simple yet powerful prayer, without the need for elaborate rituals or attention-seeking gestures. He prayed for God to reveal himself as the true God of Israel, and to show the people that everything Elijah had done was at God's command. Elijah prayed, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Immediately after Elijah's prayer, fire fell from heaven, consuming not only the offering but also the wood, stones, and even the water in the trench. This was an undeniable miracle defying all natural laws. It clearly demonstrated that the God of Israel was the true and powerful God. The people witnessing this extraordinary event fell to the ground and cried out, "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" The challenge not only affirmed God's power before the people, but also brought them back to true faith. The challenge on Mount Carmel was not just a religious confrontation, but a turning point in Israel's spiritual history. Through this event, God not only confirmed His authority, but also revived Israel's faith in Him, as they had been led astray by the worship of foreign gods. Elijah, with his courage and strong faith, became the spiritual leader who brought the people back to God. This challenge serves as a lesson in loyalty and unwavering faith in God, demonstrating that He is always ready to answer and reveal His power when we place our complete trust in Him. 4. Elijah's secret: unshakable faith and prayer. The Bible emphasizes that Elijah was a man of deep, heartfelt prayer, with a profound belief in God's willingness to answer. In James 5:17-18 it says, "Elijah was a man just like us. He prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it did not rain on the land for 3.5 years. Again he prayed, and the heavens gave rain, and the earth produced its crops." This demonstrates the extraordinary power of prayer when we place our full trust in God. Elijah's strength didn't come from any supernatural ability, but from his close relationship with God, nurtured through his life of prayer. Elijah didn't just pray in times of challenge, he had an unshakable faith that God would respond. During the event on Mount Carmel, facing 450 prophets of Baal, Elijah did not waver or fear. He even requested water be poured over the altar and wood to make it nearly impossible for fire to ignite, yet he still prayed with absolute confidence that God would send fire from heaven. Elijah's trust in God's power was not only evident in public moments like this, but also in personal and private times. For instance, when he prayed for the widow's son in Zarephath to be raised from the dead, Elijah prayed earnestly, fully believing that God would perform a miracle. One of the striking aspects of Elijah's prayer life was that he always prayed in alignment with God's will. In 1 Kings 18:36, Elijah makes it clear that everything he did was according to God's command. "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command." This alignment with God's will was the core of Elijah's strength. He didn't act on his own desires, but always sought and obeyed God's will. This deep connection with God's plan is why his prayers were answered so miraculously. Elijah didn't just pray in moments of strength, but also in times of weakness and despair. After his victory on Mount Carmel, Elijah found himself afraid and discouraged when Queen Jezebel threatened his life. He fled into the wilderness and prayed, asking God to take his life because he felt overwhelmed and defeated. But even in that moment of weakness, Elijah turned to God in prayer. God didn't respond with an earthquake or a blazing fire, but with a gentle whisper that comforted and guided him. This shows that prayer isn't just about asking for miracles, but also a way to find comfort and direction from God during difficult times. A key aspect of Elijah's prayer life was his expectation of God's intervention. He didn't pray with doubt, but with certainty that God would answer. Elijah didn't rely on complex rituals or dramatic actions. He prayed simply, with strong faith that God would act. This was clearly seen during the challenge on Mount Carmel, where Elijah offered a brief prayer, and God immediately responded with fire from heaven. Elijah's secret of unshakable faith and earnest prayer isn't something unique to him. It's accessible to every Christian today. The Bible makes it clear that Elijah was a man just like us, meaning his power came not from any supernatural ability, but from a steadfast prayer life and strong faith in God. Each of us can develop a similar life of prayer, always seeking God's will and trusting that He will answer. In conclusion, Elijah's secret lies in the perfect combination of unshakable faith and sincere, continuous prayer. He didn't just pray to get what he wanted. He prayed in accordance with God's will, trusting fully in God's intervention. This combination gave Elijah extraordinary strength and serves as a valuable lesson for all Christians in developing a close relationship with God through prayer and faith. 5. The encounter with God's gentle whisper, the prophet. Elijah's encounter with God's gentle whisper is one of the most profound and meaningful moments in his life, reflecting his intimate relationship with the Lord. After his victory on Mount Carmel, where he defeated the prophets of Baal, Elijah found himself weary, fearful, and in despair. Queen Jezebel, enraged by Baal's defeat and the death of her prophets, ordered Elijah's execution. Despite having just witnessed the mighty power of God on Mount Carmel, Elijah felt weak and afraid for his life. He fled into the wilderness, where he prayed to God to take his life, feeling utterly defeated and exhausted. In 1 Kings 19:4, Elijah prays, "I have had enough, Lord, take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." At this point, Elijah felt incredibly alone and drained, even though he had just seen God's miraculous intervention. This shows that even those with great faith can experience moments of weakness, fear, and discouragement. Elijah was not only physically exhausted from the confrontation with Baal's prophets, but also spiritually drained. After fleeing, Elijah reached Mount Horeb, also known as Mount Sinai, where God had once appeared to Moses. There, Elijah took refuge in a cave. In 1 Kings 19:9-13, God instructs Elijah to stand on the mountain before him. What follows is one of the most unique and special moments in the Bible. A powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered rocks, but God was not in the wind. After the wind came an earthquake, but God was not in the earthquake. Then came a fire, but God was not in the fire. Finally, there was a gentle whisper, and that is where God spoke to Elijah. God's gentle whisper symbolizes a deeply meaningful image of how God often chooses to reveal himself and communicate with humanity. While God's power is frequently displayed through mighty phenomena such as fire, wind, or earthquakes, like the grand miracles Elijah had witnessed, in this moment, he chose to appear in stillness and quiet. This shows that God is not only present in grand events or miracles, but also close, tender, and subtle in the quiet moments of our lives. From this encounter, we learn that God does not always speak through dramatic acts or spectacular events, but he also communicates through gentle whispers in everyday life. God's presence in the whisper reminded Elijah, and reminds us, that he is always near, even in our moments of weakness and despair. He is not only the powerful God who sends fire from heaven, but also the gentle one who knows when to comfort and lift us up softly. God did not rebuke or chastise Elijah for his fear and weakness. Instead, he comforted and guided him gently. God listened to Elijah's pain and responded with empathy, giving him the time he needed to recover. After speaking through the whisper, God provided Elijah with instructions on what to do next. He told Elijah to return and anoint Elisha as his successor, continuing his prophetic mission. This shows that even in our lowest moments, when we feel lost or weak, God still has a plan and direction for us. Elijah's encounter with God's gentle whisper is an important lesson about stillness and listening in our spiritual lives. In a world filled with noise, busyness, and distractions, we often focus too much on grand events and miss the quiet moments where God may be speaking to us. This event encourages us to create moments of silence in our lives where we can hear God's voice, whether it is a small word of wisdom, a sense of peace, or a gentle nudge. 6. Lessons from Elijah's life for modern Christian living unshakable faith. Elijah is a powerful example of unwavering faith in God. Throughout his life, Elijah demonstrated absolute trust in God's power and presence, even when faced with overwhelming challenges. He never wavered in the face of societal pressure or the threats of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. In modern times, Christians are also confronted with many pressures and temptations to abandon their faith. Elijah's life teaches us that our faith should not be shaken by circumstances, but rather it should stand firm on the foundation of trust in God. Steadfast and powerful prayer, Elijah teaches us the strength of persistent prayer. His life shows that prayer is not just about presenting our needs to God, but a means to connect and seek his will. Elijah didn't only pray in difficult times, but he prayed with steadfastness and the expectation that God would respond. The Bible tells us that the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective, James 5:16, and Elijah's life is proof of this. In modern life, Christians need to maintain a deep and regular prayer life, always seeking God's guidance in every decision and situation. Courage to stand for the truth. Elijah stood alone against the 450 prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, unafraid of the pressure or the majority. He dared to challenge the entrenched idolatry that had taken over the culture and society of his time, doing so out of loyalty to God. This lesson reminds us of the importance of living by the truth and defending our faith in a world that constantly demands compromise. Modern believers, too, face pressure from society to accept values that conflict with Christian beliefs. Elijah teaches us to stand courageously for the truth, even when we feel isolated or outnumbered, seeking God's presence in stillness. One of the key lessons from Elijah's encounter with God's gentle whisper is the importance of seeking his presence in silence. In today's noisy and busy world, we often overlook the small moments where God may be speaking to us. Like Elijah, we need to take time to be still and listen to God's voice rather than always seeking him in grand events. This can be achieved through moments of quiet reflection, Bible study, and being attentive to the Holy Spirit's guidance in our daily lives. Accepting and overcoming moments of weakness. Elijah was not always strong. After his victory on Mount Carmel, he experienced moments of weakness, fear, and despair when pursued by Queen Jezebel. Yet God did not abandon him. Instead, God met Elijah in his time of need, comforting and guiding him back to his mission. This lesson reminds us that no one is perfect, and even those with the strongest faith may feel tired and weak at times. The important thing is to always return to God during these difficult moments, seeking his comfort and guidance. God is always ready to stand by and help us even when we feel undeserving, submitting and acting according to God's will. Elijah always acted according to God's direction, from challenging the prophets of Baal to choosing Elisha as his successor. He didn't act on his own will, but continually sought and followed God's guidance. This teaches us that submission to God's will is the core of a faithful life. In modern life, we are often tempted to act according to what we think is best. But the lesson from Elijah is to always seek God's direction before acting to ensure that we are living according to his will. God always has a greater plan. Even when Elijah felt alone and defeated after facing Jezebel, God still had a bigger plan. Not only did God comfort Elijah, but he also gave him a new mission, preparing the next generation of prophets through Elisha. This shows that even when we feel there's no way out or feel unable to go on, God still has a plan for our lives. This lesson encourages modern Christians to never give up, even when facing failure or hardship, because God always has a plan for our future. Thank you for joining us at Science for Real as we explored the secret of Elijah together. His life and unwavering faith are a timeless source of inspiration for every Christian today. If you're ready to continue this journey of discovering other amazing mysteries, make sure to hit subscribe and like so you don't miss out on our upcoming videos. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Remember, the secret of Elijah isn't just a story from the past. It's a key to living a powerful life of faith today. See you in the next episode of Science for Real.